Hey everyone, welcome to HearSay Shorts. I'm your host, Mariella Paulino. I'm a Hispanic woman. I have shoulder-length hair. I am wearing a black shirt with the AudioEye logo, and I'm in my home office where you can see some artwork and pictures behind me. I'm also a woman with a hearing disability who uses a cochlear implant. Today, I'm joined by Max Ivey. Max is a digital accessibility consultant at AudioEye and a Texan entrepreneur. Max's story is a testament to resiliency and innovation. He founded the Midway Marketplace website, hosts a podcast called What's Your Excuse, and is the new co-host of the AudioEye HearSay Shorts, a series dedicated to the heroes of accessibility who are paving the way, building an inclusive future, and making a difference in the lives of people with disabilities, one short story at a time. We are so pleased to have him here. Max, welcome. Please go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Good morning, Mariella, and thank you for having me. I am Maxwell Ivey, known as the Blind Blogger. I'm a Caucasian male with medium-length brown curly hair, brown eyes, wearing a white button-down shirt with a black tie, sitting in my bedroom in front of a green screen. I have retinitis pigmentosa with light perception and limited peripheral vision, and I depend mostly on a screen reader, either VoiceOver or JAWS for Windows.
Love it. We are so excited to have you here today, and I'm really excited for the conversation that we're going to be having. I would love to explore that a little bit more, Max. What is retinitis pigmentosa?
Sure. Retinitis pigmentosa is a degenerative hereditary disease that attacks the retina. It will cause you to lose peripheral vision, night blindness, affect your ability to see colors and small objects. It can eventually lead to a very narrow field of vision called tunnel vision, and can eventually lead to total blindness.
Is this a progressive disability that you've had?
Yes, it is generally progressive. I was first diagnosed when I was about 5, had gradual degeneration until I entered puberty. My vision stayed constant until I went off to college. And by the time I graduated from college, it was down to pretty much what it is now. And I really feel like the progressive nature of my disease has helped me in my life as an entrepreneur, because I was constantly having to adjust to a new level of ability and come up with new accessibility options, sometimes on a weekly or monthly basis. And I think I've told you this before. I had to go from being able to read a small print book in a dark room to needing much more light, larger print, eventually a closed circuit television monitor, and then switching to audiobooks and Braille. And I feel like those kinds of things have really served me well as a business owner.
That's awesome. One of the things that I love about you and the conversations that we've had is that you're so many different things, and your career has really spanned across a range of industries and spaces. I would love to have our audience know, what is the Max Ivey story? Who are you?
I think the thing that most exemplifies me is the willingness to take on new challenges or adventures. Some of them out of necessity, and many of them because of good friends, including people at AudioEye who suggested or encouraged me to do so. I started the Midway Marketplace in 2007 after my dad's death had caused the closure of our small traveling carnival. I wasn't one of those people who could just do nothing, so I did what I knew, which was helping people sell used rides. Unfortunately, at that time, the only way I could get online was to learn to code HTML and build my website one line of code at a time. It's very challenging, and it's been interesting for me to watch the growth of accessibility from an internet that was almost totally inaccessible to one now where we're seeing so many improvements almost on a daily basis.
100%. And I would love to explore that a little bit more, because you were one of the first disability advocates, accessibility entrepreneurs that had a disability that was doing this work. And your name on, like, the brand that you have is the Blind Blogger. What's that about? Can you tell me a little bit of the story behind the name?
Yes, I love telling that story, especially now that you have helped me understand that it's even more powerful than I ever thought it was. And I appreciate you for that. I had been promoting the used rides on social media for a while, and people had started calling me the blind blogger. The Midway Marketplace did have a blog. I was the only blind person most people online knew who had a blog. So as a former shorthand, that's what they started calling me. And after a couple years of them calling me that and encouraging me to share more about being a blind entrepreneur, I finally took the plunge and I asked them, well, what do I call myself? And they said, we've been calling you the blind blogger for 2 years. What else would you be at this point? And I had to agree with them. I was so glad that I did. But I didn't realize that there was this stigma around being open about your disability as a business owner or online in general. And I lost some very close friends to me and had many others who were very negative and accusatory. They were like, Max, you're too good at what you do to have to play the blind card, to have to go for sympathy. And I was like, I'm not going for nothing. It's just who I am at this time. And if y'all have problems with it, then y'all need to figure out what's wrong with you.
Ooh, spicy. Why do you, or actually a better question, how do you feel the space has changed since you first started doing the blind blogger all these years ago? Like you talked about how it's really transformed in terms of accessibility from when you started doing HTML to now. How do you see things being different?
Well, one of the things is so many more people with a disability are open about their disability. They use it in their brand names, their website URLs, their social media names. Thanks to combined pressure, we now have all these emoticons and stickers around disability that are available for people to express their individuality as a disabled person. And when I started as the blind blogger, there was nobody, the blind blogger, somebody in a wheelchair or deaf. It just didn't exist. And I've been so amazed to see how over time, now you can't go 5 minutes on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter without running across an emoticon based on disability in somebody's profile or post. And it makes me smile so big when I think about, Max, you were part of making that happen.
I love that. It really is. It makes me feel incredible to know that in having this conversation with you, I'm having a conversation with one of the pioneers in disability acceptance and just really taking that idea that disability is not a bad word. You leaned into that aspect of your identity and you did something with it. You created a brand around it. You were the first and sometimes the only person talking about these issues. So every time I have a conversation with you, it's just like, oh my God, Max is a pioneer in this space. And I'm so happy that you're really telling that story.
And every time you remind me of that, I get this big old smile on my face like I just had for people that are listening to this or people that are visually impaired trying to follow along at home. My eyes almost closed up and I almost have a dimple. And you can just tell hearing Mariella remind me of these things has just made my day.
Absolutely. And honestly, Max, I really feel like for me, my own disability journey, my own accessibility journey, my own kind of like reclaiming that identity is so important for me to just really recognize that the way that we talk about disability, when we talk about disability 10, 20 years ago, is very different than the way we talk about disability now. There was and still is so much stigma around disability. And I love that people like you have been doing this work for as long as you have, because you really have paved the way for those of us that come after you to be able to follow in that work and to just really, again, reclaim that aspect of our identity. There is no stigma around disability. There should not be any stigma. So Awesome to have you here. I'd love to move right along. One of the things that you also do is you have your own podcast. What's your excuse? Can you tell me a little bit about the work behind that name as well? I'd love to have our audience know that story.
Right. Well, the podcast was started because a lot of other podcast hosts kept telling me that I would make a great host. And after a while, I finally found a gentleman named Fred By who stepped up and volunteered to do the technical stuff so I could get started in a way where all I would have to do is show up and talk to people, which, as you know, I'm really good at. And when we were struggling for a name, people said, Max, back when you were starting as the blind blogger, when you were selling used rides and we saw all the things you had to overcome, we always thought, and some of us even said, if Max can do it, then what's my excuse? And from people that I reached out to before naming the podcast, it was like, what other name would we go with? But what's your excuse? And the name has really resonated with a lot of people. I have written a song called What's Your Excuse that I sing on the intro and the outro of the podcast, and have even been invited to sing at events like one of the AFB graduations a couple of years ago. And
wow.
it's just a place where I bring on people who have overcome difficult challenges. I have them tell their story, but the main thing about their story is, what is the actual thing that you did to help you overcome your situation? In order to understand that, we have to know where you started. But I feel like too many, let's call them inspirational podcasts, are about the person now and all the great things they're doing now. My podcast is about the journey. And way too many people get stopped or stuck in the middle of the journey, as I know you are aware of. So What's Your Excuse just felt good and it stuck. And one of the many times in my life where somebody else said this would be a great name, and I was smart enough to just say yes and thank you.
Ooh, love that. Love that. I'm really, really excited for you continuing to do some of that work here with AudioEye, HearSay Shorts, and being able to tell those stories in a different way. I have a few follow-up questions before we wrap up. Why should people care about accessibility? Like, why should people care about the work that you do and have been doing? Let's start there.
That's one of the easiest questions I get asked on any day. First, when you design to include people with disabilities, you not only make their lives easier, but you enhance the user experience for everyone else who will use your product or service or visit your website or app. Second, it gives you the opportunity to reach a huge, mostly untapped market of highly loyal consumers who are ready to engage with inclusive products and services to the point that they will advocate for businesses willing to make the effort. And it's not just that disabled person, it's also the reach of their friends, families, coworkers, and social media followings. And finally, when you include people in your workplace, you give yourself the opportunity to bring dedicated, loyal, positive, creative, solution-finding people into your staff and your team. And as we all know, the less work you have to do to bring in new employees, the more money you're making, because you're not spending all that money recruiting, attracting, and hiring new people.
I love that. And then let's wrap up with one final question for you. What message or advice would you like to leave with our audience, particularly business leaders or professionals, regarding the importance of prioritizing accessibility in today's digital landscape?
Right. Well, first, let's remind them that when we talk about the disability community, we're talking about over 1 billion people globally, over 60 million people in the US alone. And this is an audience that is really not being considered in a lot of the creation of products, services, and marketing. So start with those numbers and ask yourself if you can afford to ignore a market that large. And then when it comes to accessibility, I want y'all to think of it this way. Accessibility is not just about compliance. Accessibility is about innovation, reputation, and growth. And by embracing accessibility, they can grow their company as we move into a more accessible and inclusive future.
Thank you so much, Max. This was an amazing conversation, and I'm so excited for the follow-up conversations that will follow. With that said, we are done with our kickoff HearSay Shorts. We'll talk next time. HearSay Shorts is produced by Sojin, Mike Barton, Mariella Paulino, Missy, Jensen, and Max Ivey. Edited by Alex Dorrier. If you enjoyed this podcast and don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.